Lastly, I wanted to report briefly on a meeting that was held between Chief Abrams, Captain Corbello, our police mentor, Chief Spruill, and the chairs of the Highland Park Equity Commission, Justin Burton and Lucinda Holt. I wanted to thank everybody who was able to attend that. And at the meeting that was focused on issues of how the Highland Park Equity Commission can assist and be part of the process of developing benchmarks for the new police leadership team. Specifically, we focused on 3 areas that are quite important: ways of expanding training opportunities for all police officers in de-escalation, implicit bias, and procedural justice, and ways of reporting to the public how those trainings have been planned and how those trainings have been carried out. Second, on ways that different types of data collection can be improved. Some of those are technological issues, some of those are procedural issues, but again, all of those reporting of that is something that is an important part of the process that we are undergoing and that the Equity Commission will be a part of. And then lastly, ways of improving and explaining an existing anonymous complaint system. One of the things that the Equity Commission has been interested in and working on is developing a system where anonymous complaints can be delivered to the police department. Currently, anyone who has a complaint against a police officer or has any complaint can drop those in anonymously to the police department, and those will automatically start a process. There is a lot of work to do on how to make that process a little bit more transparent, and the group that we were talking about and working with sort of got a good start on that. So I just wanted to report.
The overlay ordinance pertains to the Buck Woods property. The ordinance was introduced a month ago, and a public hearing was scheduled for this evening. Since the ordinance was introduced, we've had several mediation sessions with our special master in our Mount Laurel lawsuit. In fact, we have another one this coming Thursday. The purpose of that was to refine and revise the ordinance so that the issues that were raised many times by the residents of this community were addressed. I can assure you, for example, the ordinance will not permit a gated community. It will not be a gated community, as was proposed 20 years ago and defeated. So right now, we are meeting with the folks that own Buck Woods, and we're also meeting with our planner, and we're also meeting with the mediator who has been appointed by Judge McCluskey. And we're working on final revisions to the ordinance. That ordinance is scheduled to be completed and considered by this council for introduction. That is the new ordinance at the meeting on June the 11th. And the final public hearing on that ordinance would be scheduled for Tuesday, July the 2nd. And at that time, we would present that ordinance, if it is adopted, to Judge McCluskey as a part of our affordable housing compliance plan, which will be presented at a compliance hearing on July 14th. So that's the current schedule for wrapping up the overlay zoning ordinance for Buck Woods. The ordinance does, if you read the ordinance and you want to comment this evening, which you'll be given an opportunity to do so, does provide for the construction, an alternate form of construction, the underlying residential zoning, which would allow putting individual houses on small 5,000 square foot lots across the property, is not being repealed. That will still remain. What is happening is the overlay ordinance will give an alternative way to develop the property that would allow for the construction of not more than 75 multifamily units of housing. And of the 75, if there are ownership units, 20% of them, or 15, would be affordable housing. The rest would be market rate housing. And if it's rental housing, 15% of those units would be rented to persons of low and moderate income housing. That's how they become a part of our affordable housing compliance plan. The plan is also to have the units assembled in 2 buildings. Neither building can have more than 40 units, and those buildings would be located closest to where 6th Avenue currently terminates. That's the general plan that is not going to change when the new ordinance is proposed on June the 11th. But there are a lot of details that have to be worked out in terms of the coverage, in terms of trying to prevent or preserve some of the property to the rear of the property, I'll call it, going towards the river. And those are the details that are being worked on right now as part of the overlay ordinance. So with that introduction or explanation, certainly the council will proceed with the hearing tonight. But at the end of the hearing, I would suggest someone entertain a motion to table the vote tonight and continue the hearing until July the 2nd. We did that with the other Buckwoods ordinance which was introduced. So on the evening of July the 2nd, the ordinance, the new ordinance, can be considered for adoption, and the other ordinances which are no longer valid would be defeated. And that would be procedurally where we are.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of follow-up questions from the Borough Council's report that you just gave. The hearing on July 2nd, that is the final hearing on this matter, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Leading up to that, can residents put in writing their thoughts and considerations to what's existing, or will there be a new ordinance entirely that comes out that we will be able to read and make comments?
There will be a new ordinance which the council will consider for adoption on June 11th.
Okay, so
That ordinance being worked on right now. As soon as it's done, it'll be posted, and you can certainly comment on that ordinance.
okay, and will that be?
I think the best way to proceed, if you had comments after you see the ordinance, and we're going to try to post it as quickly as we can, you can certainly send those comments in to the clerk. But it would be also very important to attend the meeting on the 11th to make sure you have the right ordinance, and to come back in particular on July 2nd and enter your testimony into the record. But if you want to comment ahead of time, which is wonderful, well, you can submit those comments to the clerk.
Okay, and participating in the planning board meetings, does that have any effect on this ordinance?
No, the planning board process will be in addition to what the governing body will do. So the ordinance that'll be considered for introduction, assuming it's introduced on the 11th of June, will be referred to the planning board, and they will take that up at a public hearing. You can attend that public hearing. You can make comments and send your comments to the planning board at that time. And then the matter would come back to the council for a final hearing on July 2nd.
Okay, and my last question, just to get clarity. So the existing zoning is for single-family housing, and that zoning has not changed, is that correct?
That's correct.
And so the overlay, as you were saying, is just an alternate plan for?
It's an alternate way to develop the property, yes.
So in essence, the developer can choose either one?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.